If you find you're unsettled listening today, reach out to a trusted friend or go to tradespodcast.com and click on resources.
We are men in the trades, forging health in the drug poisoning crisis. This is
Off the Clock Toolbox Talk.
Hey, Karen here today with Daniel, and we have special guest from In the Trenches.
Hi, I'm Jason White. I'm the General Manager of Service at Nightingale Electrical. And I have my own battles with addiction and I've worked there for 15 years, and it's great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Jason.
I'm really looking forward to hearing how you're going to set this up, Karen. Tell me how did you deconstruct your inner asshole? Have you finished that process? Are you done?
Exactly. I'm doing it all the time.
So to start the conversation, I do want to do a little disclaimer for our literal thinkers out there. Please do not deconstruct your physical rectum. Put down the implements. If you're using your fingers, please use them for stimulation only, not deconstruction. We are talking about deconstructing the inner asshole inside your mind, inside your head. But first, we're going to do a little safety piece. And that is sometimes when we start talking about our inner asshole can emerge with fury and try to stop us from understanding him. There's actually a term for it called backdraft, like a fire. When the fire is inside and it doesn't have any oxygen, it's kind of whatever. And then you open the door and the fire gets oxygen and it just comes like raging out. Sometimes that does happen when we first start talking about deconstructing our inner asshole. So if that does happen, I want you to have a plan to kind of ground yourself. I'm not expecting it to happen, but sometimes it comes out of nowhere. Just have something that you can ground yourself with. And it might be like a pet around or a good friend or, I don't know, a rock feature nearby, something that you can focus on. Sometimes it helps just to get in the moment and just to take a look around. If you're suddenly feeling like your inner asshole is attacking you, just take a look around the setting that you're in and just name what you can see. Right now, I can see a tree, I can see a lamp, I can see my air conditioner sitting in the window. And just like it gets you grounded, it gets you back in the moment, and it gets you out of your head, because your asshole can really only hold you hostage in your head. In reality, if you get into the world around you, you should be safe. So how does that feel for you guys so far?
I feel like that you were looking right at me. Were you looking right at me when you were giving that warning, Karen?
Yeah, I would wonder, like, what does that sound like? Like, what does that inner asshole sound like? You're describing it, so well, like what, and that might come out, and these are the ways you deal with it. Your inner asshole will be saying, this is stupid. You should turn this off. This is dumb. You shouldn't listen to any of this. You're stupid that you even started listening to this. Like, this is irrelevant. Why are you bothering? You're broken anyway. Those are the kind of things that your inner asshole might say.
Oh my God. You're like, so talk, that is exactly the voice of inner asshole. And you were saying it very calmly, Jason. So I'm assuming that in your head it's not actually coming in that calmly.
Yeah, right.
That's accurate to what I think many of us would go through.
Okay, so Karen, can you give us some examples of what the inner asshole looks like? What does it say? What does it do? I mean, is this personal to each individual person, or help me understand this?
Well, let's do a couple of examples, and I'll toss each of you guys a scenario, and then you can tell me maybe what your inner asshole would be saying to you in these scenarios. So, Daniel, I'm going to throw one at you first. So you just realized you missed an important detail that affects your team or crew. What kinds of thoughts are going through your mind?
Oh, that's a pretty easy one, because that's happened not too long ago. Generally, I feel like I am letting everyone down. Everyone depends on me, even though that's not true. And that, I look bad. And so mostly I'm concerned about how my reputation, or how I as a person am being perceived. Mm-hmm. And so I go on, I do double duty to try and kind of convince everyone that that I'm actually very competent, and that these kinds of mistakes are very, very rare. and that it's not something that they should expect to be a pattern by any means. And then there's an exceptional pressure that I put on myself to not do that, to not repeat that. And then internally, I think I've gotten a lot better. So I might actually have to go back in time a little bit to be where I was quite harsh with myself. But my language, the way I talk to myself, has improved in recent years. But in the past, that would be,
Yeah.
a lot of name calling, a lot of kind of trying to confirm, oh, you're a loser, you're a failure. Oh, you're not as good as you think you are at this or that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm relating to a lot of what you're saying. And sometimes those thoughts hit me so hard, they almost knock the wind out of me. Like that's how loud, and it's not necessarily a loud screaming in my head, but it's just such a strong thought. Like, oh, you like fucked up again. Like, why did you let that detail go? What's wrong with you? Okay, Jason, I got one that's electrician specific for you.
Oh, good.
Okay, I don't know if this has ever happened to you or not, but last week you yelled at an apprentice, wrote him up, making a bit of a scene for not turning the breaker off in order to get the job done faster. Just now, you forgot to turn off the power and got a shock of major voltage, and everyone on site saw it. What kinds of thoughts are going through your mind?
Idiot. That's the first thing, and that's always the most pervasive. The first thing that my inner asshole says, you're an idiot. Why would you do that? You're smarter than this. It's a put down. That description that you gave, that has almost happened to me exactly. And I
Sorry.
have, I mean, I've never yelled at an apprentice for not turning off the power. I'm usually telling them to turn off the power because I don't want them to hurt themselves. But I have yelled at him for not turning it off and for doing it live, only to then, you know, think that I turned it off, go turn it, turn a different one off, come back, not test it, and electrocute myself like quite badly in a way that it really could have hurt me. I just got
Mm-hmm.
lucky, in fact, that it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of don't, in the moment, it kind of passes you by, and you go, "Oh, I'm lucky," and then you think about it later, and it's more of a, oh, like I said, you're an idiot. How could you do that? This could have
Fuck.
cost you your life. Like you're useless. Like how didn't you plan for this? Like everyone knows that happened to you. Like, everybody else is also going to think that you're stupid and you're not worth listening to. You're a poor leader.
See, now you're starting to come out with that voice that I'm feeling the pain of your inner asshole. Wow. I have one more that we can actually, maybe we'll try, either one of you can respond to it. So your partner calls you at work for the bazillionth slash second time that day, and you refuse to answer because your crew thinks that you're whipped. Later, you find out there was an emergency your family needed you for. What kinds of thoughts are going through your mind?
Well, I always like whenever I had a crew, it was like my rule was family first. And so
Mm,
no matter who it was calling, it was
I'm gonna
always
come
that
work for you.
that well, it was family always comes first. It's the most important thing, right? It's most important to like all of your mental health and like all of your health in general. Like if things are troubling at home, how can you perform at work? When I see somebody kind of go down in performance at work, somebody who was doing fine, that's always
Mm-hmm.
the first question I ask is like, what's wrong? What
Mm,
like people don't just like start failing at work usually if there's nothing going on. It's
mm-hmm.
usually spurred on by something else. So I usually pull the guy aside and sit down and he's like, "Oh, here, I'm just about to get it." And then I'll go like, "What's wrong at home?" And they're like, "What?" And it's like, "What's wrong at home?" Like I can tell something's wrong. Like what is it? And they
Mm,
they don't always want to tell you either, right?
mm,
Nothing's fine. Okay, well, that's fine. Great. Your performance sucks right now, so I need you to be better. So I just thought
mm-hmm.
maybe there was something wrong.
Yeah, and there probably is, but they potentially can't even articulate it. Like we don't all have the self-awareness or self-attunement to be able to articulate it in the moment. But that's good that you just asked the question anyways, because then the question's been asked and then they can kind of be like, I don't know, what is wrong? Is this really bugging me that much?
Well, I've had a
So,
wide range of responses too. I've had like guys be like, "Nothing's wrong. It's none of your business." Okay, no problem. And then I've had a guy like, literally burst into tears in the middle of the lockup in the parkade in front of me because like he's just holding on to the edges, right?
Yeah.
He like the threads are ripping the seams apart of his whole life, and no one's ever asked him probably, "Are you okay?" Right? And
Yeah.
that's like, and usually when you give them a little bit of a break and you're like, hey, like, you know, work is work and I need you to be better here. Like just the fact that somebody realizes and understands they're going through something else, usually their performance improves immediately because like
Mm.
they've been
Mm-hmm.
holding it in, right? Like
Yeah.
a tensile rubber band wound so tightly and they let a little bit of it out and they go, okay, like somebody knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And that would be a hint, I think, of where we're going with this whole episode of when you have the smallest piece of self-compassion breakthrough in that environment, it's enough to carry you through and help you to keep going when, you know, inner asshole has just been wreaking havoc in your mind to the point where it's paralyzing. But we'll get to that part in a minute. Okay, I just kind of want to set up a bit of a metaphor here. Let's imagine that your mind is like a nightclub that either used to be really awesome, but now it kind of sucks, or it always has sucked, but you're stuck there anyways. We can't always control what's going on in the world around us, but we do have some control over what thoughts we let into the lounge in the club of our mind. So everybody has an inner bouncer that controls what thoughts are allowed in the nightclub of your mind. They should be checking credentials to make sure that the thoughts are legit and preventing nuisance clients or nuisance thoughts from bothering the good thoughts. They should be kicking out thoughts that have overstayed their welcome, thoughts who have become abusive or cruel, and definitely intrusive thoughts that aren't allowing all the other thoughts or patrons to have their say. That's kind of what your inner bouncer is supposed to be doing. A lot of us don't know that we have an inner bouncer. And so if you didn't know that you have one, you can post one right now. Or if you have one, but he's been asleep, maybe he's been overworked, you can post a new one in there, or you can give the old one a whole vat of coffee or something like that. But your
Well, are we
inner
sure this bouncer was trained properly?
well, this is the thing. We need to make sure our bouncer has been trained properly to understand who's safe to let in, who's not, you know, have their list of no entries. And sometimes inner asshole should be let in, but there needs to be somebody who understands how to handle inner asshole on the inside.
so you can let inner asshole into the nightclub, but you know, the second you see him having more than his third drink, you're like, yo, you're on thin ice. I will throw you out of here. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got
So
to keep an eye on that guy.
that's exactly
Absolutely.
it. Dr. Gabor Mate, who's a really big trauma specialist, he's kind of like a Hollywood superstar now, but he's from the greater Vancouver area. And I did a workshop with him long before he was famous, when you could still sit around a table with 10 other people and him. And I remember him saying that he didn't call it inner asshole. He probably called it inner critic, which is the therapeutic or clinical term for inner asshole. But he said recognizing asshole or inner critic is 80% of the work. So that's one of the things that you need to retrain your bouncer to do is just to recognize asshole and all the different outfits and looks and costumes that inner asshole may approach in. And we're going to take a look at some of those a little bit later. So if he sneaks past you, then you've got a lot of work to do because he's going to wreak havoc. If inner asshole takes over your mind, all the other good parts basically have to hide out because he's such an asshole and he's tearing the place up and everybody's hiding under tables and not saying anything and hiding in the bathroom and everything else. We sometimes need to do some cleanup work if asshole has been allowed in. But if you can identify him, you've got a couple different options. You can seclude him where you can still hear him, but he's not destroying everything. Because sometimes asshole also has some interesting information for us, which we'll get to shortly. You can listen with compassionate curiosity, find out why he's so upset, and then discover he can sometimes be helpful. You can numb him out, but as soon as he's unnumbed, he's like an angry drunk that's even worse. You can also fill your club so full of the other people, like helpfulness, hopefulness, enjoyment, creativity, all those different kinds of thoughts. You can fill your club with those thoughts so much so that there's no space for asshole to come in.
So like your inner asshole, like, you know, you asked about him playing a part, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he belongs there, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't get rid of him entirely.
No.
You can't, and you shouldn't get rid of him entirely because he serves purposes. There are times in your life where you need to be aggressive,
Yeah.
or you need to be driven,
Yeah.
or you need to criticize yourself because you are not doing a good enough job. All those times exist, and you need your asshole in those moments
Yeah.
because
Mm.
you need to listen to him, but you also need to understand the color of his glasses, I'll say. You know, we
Yes.
talk about the world. Sometimes people see the world through rose-colored glasses. You got to understand that your inner asshole sees the world through cynic's eyes. So
Mm-hmm.
everything is going to go sideways. You know, always preparing for the worst case scenario. Everybody is out to get you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the thoughts and ideas that are coming from that inner asshole part of yourself. So sometimes you do need to plan for the worst case scenario,
Yeah.
not because it's definitely going to happen, but because you need to be prepared to not be broken if it does. So
Yes.
that inner asshole, he's there to protect you as well. He's there to protect the soft parts of you
Mm-hmm.
that, want to be optimistic and want to believe that the world can be helped and that people love each other and they can be nice to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's actual assholes out there that will stomp on you.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. And that's what Dr. Kristen Neff was talking about when she calls it the yin and the yang of self-compassion, is that you need to be able to weave back and forth between the two. Because if you're always in the yin, the soft, the accepting, the trusting side, you're going to get stomped on. You're going to get crushed. But
For
if you're
sure.
always in the yang side, that kind of aggressive, like get stuff done, your personality will become the asshole, and you're not going to be able to experience any. You're going to have difficulty experiencing connection and all the good stuff that weaves back and forth between the soft and the aggressive, right?
I'll
So
give you
yeah,
an
I love that you
example.
said that. Okay.
An example is when I go to the gym and I'm working out at the gym and I'm doing, hard cardio, right? I work with a trainer and, we're doing hard cardio, like running lines kind of cardio, right? And
Mm-hmm.
by the time I get to the third set, like I want to quit. I'm
Mm-hmm.
tired, I'm panting hard, and it's difficult physical work that I do not want to do. I want to quit. And it's that inner asshole inside that says, "You're a pussy. You have to keep going. If you stop right now, like you're never gonna make any gains. Like you have to keep going." And it's that voice in that moment that pushes me forward, right? It's not
Yeah.
holding me back there. It's helping me to get through difficulty. Whereas if I'm listening to my soft voices, it's like, you don't need to do this. We don't run from bears and tigers in the wild
You've
anymore.
worked
You
really
can
hard today
stop.
already.
Yeah, like you're tired. Like it's
Yeah.
time to stop and rest. You're tired. Don't push yourself any further.
Yeah.
When really, like that's where you gain muscle. That's where you gain endurance. Though when you work the extra work when you're already tired, that's when you actually make gains.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
and
to
and that's a great example, because you go either extreme, like you go too soft, you're not going to get any results. You go too hard, you're going to injure yourself to the point that maybe you can't even work anymore and provide a roof over your head, right?
exactly.
So that's a great example. I love that example. It's perfect.
Okay, so I think I am just been hung up on that word asshole because in my vernacular, there's no positive to that term. And it's
Mm,
hard for me to see the other side. It's so that's where I'm seeing that there's a kind of a dual nature here that we're talking
mm-hmm,
about, and it's a rethinking of this terminology for me. And because when I identify an asshole, I don't want anything to do with that person.
mm-hmm,
There's nothing positive there. There's
mm-hmm.
nothing that I want to take out of that and put a spin on it. So yeah, I'm just kind of realigning this in my mind to see that there's a dual nature that we need to pay attention to here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there anybody that you know that you're friends with that you're like, oh, I really love this guy. There's so much great stuff about him, but he's kind of an asshole sometimes.
Well, I would say that about myself.
I would definitely say that about myself.
Yeah, totally. I get it.
I mean, I know some, like, there's some people that I love deeply that are like I'm very close to or have good friendships with, and but like sometimes they say and do things where I'm like, oh, you're such an asshole. Like I wouldn't do that because I think that's mean, or like you really shouldn't say that. Like, so I think about it, being an asshole, like sometimes some of the qualities that go into it are like, oh, like you don't apply the right amount of sentiment to something, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're too hard or too opinionated in a moment when, you could have been softer on it, like, or you didn't apply any amount of perspective to the situation. You just gave your opinion without thinking about what the opinion of anybody else might be or what their experience might be. And like, it's funny that we have different connotations of the same word, because sometimes when I think of somebody as an asshole, that doesn't make me want to like completely stay away from them all the time. It might, but like if a guy is kind of an asshole, like, that's just a part of the personality to me that, like, I've met people that I thought were assholes, and then I got to know them and I was like, oh, I actually like this person a lot. You just kind of have to get through the hard exterior, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people are assholes because they're afraid that people will see what they're like inside
Yeah.
and not like them for who they are. So your inner asshole becomes, like I said before, he becomes your protector.
Yeah.
That fear factor, the being afraid, I think is kind of underneath a lot of this, especially when I think about the times in my life where I'm coming across as insensitive or negative, rude, these kinds of behaviors, when I'm being an asshole, when I'm, self-centered and judgmental, those kinds of things. A lot of it underneath is a fear
Mm-hmm.
of what that person thinks of me, or maybe more accurately, fear of my own inadequacies or my own inability to perform the way I think I should, to get my own concerns, say, around a job. I mean, that's one place where I notice it does come up from time to time, is when facing a really challenging project where it's not clear how it's going to turn out or how exactly it's going to get done, and creative solutions are necessary. That's kind of when that rises up in me, and that it's actually because of fear of my own competence or incompetence, fear of my own inability to do what I'm supposed to do. And then all sorts of layers underneath that. Well, what does everyone think of me? And
More fear,
how do I look, in this
more fear.
situation? Or, yeah.
Yeah. Different
And
forms of
so,
fear.
right. Yeah. It's,
And
and
that's
so in
probably a
my,
main, if we're using the metaphor, that would be a main costume that asshole wears, is fear when they come to your nightclub, right?
in my life, it's pretty fair to say that when I mistreat other people, it's because of something, some fear within myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's like universally true. I think fear rules so much more of all of our lives than we're willing to admit and
Mm-hmm.
than we realize. Because fear is the root of a lot of things. Like most anger
Yeah,
that I experience from people is fear. Like
absolutely.
m- like most of the bad, most of these asshole tendencies and like these behaviors, like insensitivity, they're like, oh, that guy's really insensitive. Like he's afraid to be sensitive. He's
Mm-hmm.
afraid to tell you what he really thinks. It's ego. Again,
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm.
ego comes from fear. You're afraid of what other people will think.
Or people have never experienced a safe environment where they haven't been trampled, right? So they have to go to the asshole or the yang side to protect themselves, because anytime they've shown any kind of softness, they've been trampled and they have to protect themselves.
Yeah, and like trauma is so, like, you have this fear based on the trauma that you've had, the
Yeah.
trauma that you've incurred, the things that have deeply hurt you or wounded you. You're like, well, I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah.
I'm terrified that that happens again. that felt awful. That broke me. I couldn't get out of bed for a week. Like those are the fear. It just rules so much of our lives. And, you know, a lot of people walk around, they're like, I don't have any fear in my life. I just walk around like a free spirit every day. I'm like, well, show me how, because that sounds like the greatest life ever, but we all carry around fear.
Absolutely.
And,
that's it for episode 1, Deconstructing Your Inner Asshole. Please join us for episode 2, where we will be talking about the 7 different disguises that asshole sometimes wears. This has been a Fraser House Society project, hosted by Daniel Snyder, co-hosted and produced by Karen Jansen, managed by Delan Young, from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Production of this material has been made in part through a financial contribution of Health Canada. The views expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the views of Health Canada or Fraser House Society. The content of this podcast is conversation between people with living experience and should not be taken as professional advice. Shout out to Nightingale Electrical for supporting Off the Clock Toolbox Talk and standing behind our trades folks in this unregulated drug crisis. Help save lives! Go to tradespodcast.com to find tools and tips to promote the podcast on your site with minimal stressors. Like us on socials, Instagram at offtheclock.toolboxtalk. Send us constructive feedback in any form you'd like, tradespodcast@gmail.com. Help us, help you.